Hi, Jackie.
Hi.
Hi, women. My name's Adelaide, and I'm so excited that you are here for this conversation. And for those of you who are watching the recording, thank you for tuning in to this recording. I'm glad that you are here as well. So what I titled this call was Quit Exercising and Start Training. And so I am into this particular topic. Obviously, that's why I wanted us to come and discuss it together as a group and really learn the difference and why focusing on training, I think, can be truly transformative. Hi, Melissa, for your women's health. A couple guidelines right now. Just as we're getting started, as you're joining this call, I know that there was over 100 of you that signed up for this. And my encouragement is that please mute when you come on. We'll try to mute you as well, but that is really helpful. Okay. Just a little bit about me if you are new to me and this is your first introduction to me and my work. As I said, my name is Adelaide and I am a female physiologist with a specific focus on exercise physiology, meaning I'm very interested in our sit, stand, walk, move, breathe patterns and how our movement and our biomechanics influence our women's health overall. In addition to being into female biomechanics and physiology, I'm also a home birth midwife. And my work really is at the intersection of birth and movement and women's bodies. And yeah, I live in the country. I have a lovely dog, right? Just some things about me. And in terms of my work in the world and what I want us to really be talking about today, is the importance of training and not just exercising and moving your body, but specifically training for your female body as how it relates to your overall health, right? And I know that many of us are likely here because we think that like, oh, I want to be able to exercise. I want to like move. I want to checks this, box of keeping my body moving and functioning, which totally I'm here for that. And I just think this shift from sort of getting your movement in or wanting to exercise more to actually understanding an approach to training is where I've seen movement truly transform women's health as a primary aspect of like what we're doing. And another way to say that is, as opposed to like exercise supporting your health, I've seen training transform someone's health, right? So rather than it being like a component of, something that you need to check off, but really how do you actually leverage your movement practice for health gains and outcomes? Okay, so those of you who are here live, and if your cameras are on, that's great. I'm going to refer and just like ask you if things are making sense and if they're landing. And if they are, will you just do this, right? So everybody just do this. This is helpful to me, right? And why I am just like interested in making sure that you're with me and that this is landing for you. So we're here to have a conversation and definitely ask questions as needed. Okay, so the first thing that I want to offer, right, is the title is called like, what is the difference between exercising and training? And I would love to have some of you put this in the chat. You can just share what it is that you think exercise is and what it is that you think training is, and we'll come with some of this crowdsourcing knowledge, right? Because to be clear, you likely know the difference, right? I know we're here to talk about why these differences matter, but you're all smart women and you get the general gist. Let me see what I have in the chat. Okay, so what I would often say is that exercise is not bad and training is not good, right? Training has a specific goal in mind. Yep, that's a good answer, right? And rather than having this idea that like, oh, we need to like give up exercise, but rather just understanding what it is and why it has its place. So I would personally define exercise as not being goal oriented or measurable. And it's sort of random rather than progressive. I would also say that it's focused on the activity rather than the kind of like components of that movement. And it's somewhat vague. I think this is really important to look at this in a historical context because the concept of exercise, even the idea that like we need to exercise, is a very modern concept. Life has always, for all of human history, been an active and a physical endeavor. The bare necessities of survival required constant activity. Everything from walking hundreds of steps a day, thousands of steps, miles a day, to pushing, climbing, just having an incredibly mobile requirement for survival, right? So the concept of exercise really only became culturally relevant as the mobility requirements of our lives and as the really physical demands of survival minimized, along with industrialization and then modernization and then technological advancement. Does that feel clear? So no one was like, let me exercise for the most part in like 1910, right? It was just not as much a part of the culture, right? Because there wasn't this need. And I really want this to be kind of at the forefront of what of this conversation, because the idea that we need to exercise as opposed to we need to have a lifestyle that allows for movement. And what we often now deem as exercise, like, oh, I went for a walk, or oh, I like ran around, or oh, I like, did chores around the house. I like got my steps in. This is what I would call just actions of daily living. And they've largely been recategorized and sort of rebranded as exercise. And when we do that, I think we're really selling ourselves short because we're not actually challenging our bodies necessarily in ways that can create measurable gains, right? So does that feel clear so far? So a lot of us are interested in like, I want to exercise more. And you're like, yeah, I want to exercise more too. Like I would like to have a more active lifestyle. And that's where I think this idea of exercise can be useful to us. How do I, sort of adjust my actions of daily living, my lifestyle, what I'm doing on a daily or weekly basis to involve more physicality, right? That's really helpful. And that's just as I think can make our lives more enjoyable. I was looking at a friend of mine the other day, and she's a great mover and a great movement teacher. And she was like, I have cut the handles off all of my cleaning utensils. So like, she's like mopping close to the ground and like sweeping with like the broom handle cut off. And she's like, she's like a dancer and very active in that way, but she's like turned her, moving around and cleaning her house into this like, kind of crawling around the ground. Am I like that? No, I'm just trying to get my cleaning done. But the point being, the way that we're moving in our lives is what I would like to kind of put in this category of exercise. Okay. Now, the other components that sometimes happen of exercise is this kind of vague in between that is exercise culture. Let me like go to a random workout class. Let me like get my, let me, I don't know, like try to go to yoga or Pilates or like go to the strength training class at the Y, or kind of just like do a thing, which to be clear, a thing is better than no thing, right? I'm into us moving in general, but we often won't see the results that we're actually interested in. And I know I've heard from a lot of women who are struggling with this. Like I try to stay active. I like, do these, I go to these movement classes, or, I have like a class pass, or I try to follow these workouts online. Right. And you are keeping moving, but you're not necessarily making gains, which that is where I really want us to kind of quit exercising and start training. Does that mean that we shouldn't do any of that stuff? No. Does it mean I don't like take a random dance class sometimes, or go to a yoga class, or go do things that are fun? Yes. But that's not me training my physical body to improve capacity and skill. And the training aspect, I think, is what I really want women to do more of. And we're going to talk about why. Okay. So that's exercise, right? That's how I would define exercise. Let's now talk about training. I would say that training is specific, measurable, and concise. And it's geared towards creating a progression in a particular skill, right? So you can train at whatever you want. You can train to be you can train to run faster. You can train to jump higher. You can train for something sport specific, right? But the idea is that there is a component of, it's broken down into components. So you have a large goal, and then we're able to intelligently look at the physiological patterns of the body and break those down into individual components that we can then train and practice. So say I want to be able to, sprint after my children. Well, what do I know? I know, and maybe you don't, and maybe this is your goal, so we're going to use it as an example. What do we need for sprinting? We need foot pronation. We need explosive power. We need an ability to weight shift. We need to train like forward bounding actions. We need a sense of rotation in the thorax, as well as we need good respiratory diaphragmatic control. Now, if you were just exercising and going for a run, you would just go running, right? Or go jogging, and you might like slowly increase, but you might feel like you're never really getting anywhere. But if you were understanding this from a training approach, you would say, oh, these are the individual components. And if I have programming and understanding of how to actually train those components, then you'll likely see your running, say that's your goal, your running overall improve, have more comfort, have more function, and be more situated and supportive for your female physiology. Right. Now, training does not have to be sport specific, though I think it's really fun to remember that we can like do fun things, right? We can like, I don't know, play with your kids or, play a sport that you liked as a kid or just, pick something up, like meaning like pick up a hobby, something that has sort of an active interest, right? And beyond that, I think there's also a very set there's very specific things that if we're just trying to train for our longevity in our female bodies and for our overall health, there are specific actions that I think are truly required and associated with healthy aging, being able to remain independent, being able to support our basic physiological functions, being able to have being able to minimize pain, being able to have good sex, being able to, complete the actions of daily living, right? For as long as possible and not actually have this deterioration of, joints, comfort, mobility, and strength as we age. So regardless if you have an athletic training goal or not, life actually has physiological requirements that are specific to women, and moving in a way that trains and improves our capacity to complete those physiological actions is crucial for our overall health. So going back to my, sort of intro, and if you're getting to know me specifically, this is my area of expertise, is how do very specific actions, right, within the body, how do those actions then relate to improved health outcomes, not just improved athletic outcomes? Does that feel clear? So whether or not you're interested in being a badass athlete, which, like, to be clear, I'm into that. And I think that everyone can learn to be more athletic and have more fun. Or whether you're just like, I just actually want to be sure that I like have all of my organs and have, less pain and can do things into my 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like, this is where a specific training approach is truly what supports that function, where an exercise, checking the box, getting it in is likely going to maybe be better than nothing, but it's not inherently going to create the results that I think so many of us are interested in, which is being able to age independently and with grace, being able to have more fun and sort of capacity in our bodies, right? Exercise versus training, one is not better than the other. Ideally, we have both, right? Because we have active lifestyles. And if you're trying to like fit something in, you have 30 minutes and you want to like do movement of some kind, pick training because it's actually associated with like longevity, building skills, and overall health outcomes in a way that I think random exercise classes will not give you as much bang for your buck, or random exercise activities that you personally, might be doing. Does that difference feel clear? All righty, righty. Okay, so I wanted to talk about a little bit about the feeling that I think so many of us are interested in, and I would love if you can come off mute or share a little bit about this, where I know that I personally want the feeling of not worrying about my physical capacity to do something, of not being distracted by my body, right? Or not having this like, can I do that question, right? Which of course we're always going to be in the humbling experience of having a body. I'm not saying that we're entirely here to kind of transcend that, but do you remember, and maybe this has been a long time, maybe it was in your childhood, where you had this feeling like, oh, of course you could just jump up there. Of course you could just climb up there. Of course you could just catch that ball. Of course you could just run over to your friends. Of course you could jump rope. Do you know what I'm talking about? This like lack of distraction about your own personal capacity, right? Does anybody have any thoughts or experiences with this? You can put them in the chat and I will share them, right? And yeah, it's like a great feeling, right? And how many of us currently feel that way in our bodies? Feel like I'm not distracted by my concept of my physical capacity. And I don't mean like in every moment of your life, especially if you're doing things that are extreme, but I just mean in your, in your actions of daily living. I feel like I've never felt that, but I've longed for that feeling deeply my whole life. Caitlin, I can relate to that. I was not an athletic child, and then I was very severely injured in my 20s, and I've like really had to work for it too. I'm right there with you, right? Makes me feel alive and free. I'm currently thinking about future pregnancies, and I'm hoping to get that feeling for pregnancy. Ooh, I love that one, right? So you actually feel more capable as you're growing life, not less, right? And this concept of like, I want to feel more free in my body. I want to have less fear. I want to not have this like, anxiety about, am I going to hurt myself? Right? Or am I able to do that? And someone just said, I recently realized I can't do the monkey bars anymore. I owned the monkey bars as a kid, and it's really scary to feel like I can't rely on my body the way I used to. I'm a lifetime athlete, and I'm experiencing back pain and disc herniations the past couple of years. It's really humbling, to say the least, right? These are just things I'm reading from our chat. And I want to tell you that I am right there with you, right? I was, unlike maybe some of you, I was not an athletic child, though I really tried, right? And I really learned to move better with better movement quality in adulthood, right? I also had like a very severe injury in my early 20s that, required me to spend years and years and years relearning basic motor function, right? And the idea that I could feel free in my body, right? And actually have a sense of comfort and trust in my body, was something that I realized I would have to work for, right? And it felt entirely unavailable to me, right? And what I want to offer is that concept of like, if we break it down, like, are my knees going to hold me? Is that going to hurt? Will I have a pelvic symptom? Will my pelvic floor feel stable? Will I leak urine? Will I like be able to sustain that? Like, do I have the sort of stamina or endurance for that activity? Like those concerns, which I know I'm sort of mimicking them, or like, sharing what people are putting in this chat, right? And this feeling of being able to wake without pain or do athletic endeavors without fear, this is what I want us to hone in on, because I truly can say that is something we can train for, right? That is something that we can actually build capacity to have more trust in our bodies. And I know for myself, I was a yoga teacher for many years. And I mean, I've been a personal trainer for a long time as well. But I was a yoga teacher for many years. And I just had this idea like practice and all is coming, right? Just keep doing it and you will continue to improve. And that concept of just checking the box and just like doing it over and over again truly limited my progression in my training. And I see this with a lot of women. I wanted to feel free in my body, right? And what I want to offer you is there are specific things specifically for women's bodies that when we're able to train and strengthen those actions, it improves this feeling across the board, sport specific for athletes, right? And whether you consider yourself an athlete or not, I consider you an athlete if you're interested in training, right? So I want us to know that this doesn't necessarily have to be a mystery, right? It's not like, why don't I feel this way? And how could I feel this way, right? That we will build capacity by doing specific actions, understanding and strengthening those actions, and having them relate to the overall unique movement patterns of a female body, right? I want this to be demystified. This isn't just like a feeling that we'll stumble upon again. This is something that we can actually create for ourselves. Does that feel clear? Right? I'm going to read one more thing from the chat. I was a dancer my whole childhood. It felt like I could do anything, move my body in all these confident ways. A few months ago, I returned to dance, and it was wild to see all the ways that the movement was challenging. I knew how to do it in my mind, but my body wasn't following in the way that it used to. I think watching my mom feel incapable in her body, it has been very internalized, right? Yeah. Feeling like it's like inherent that we're not going to be able to do something, or that like inherently we'll lose capacity as we age. And I just want to offer that that's not inherently true, right? And what do we do about it? We understand training specifically for the female body, my queens, right? Which is what we're here to talk about. Okay. So within that, let's talk about strength training specifically, because what is strength training, right? And so obviously I'm a personal trainer, I'm a strength training coach, among other things, and that's like why I'm really passionate about this. But I would say that strength training is can also be known as resistance training, and essentially we are moving load, right? So we're moving load. This can be in form of like a band, it can be in the form of a weight, it can be in the form of body weight, we can be moving against momentum, but we're moving load in a variety of ways and in a variety of directions. Ideally, in strength training, we are increasing that load over time, right? And this is the very basic concept of progressive overload. And so your ability to move load in a variety of different directions, up, down, like sagittal plane, lateral planes, in a variety of different ways, and to be able to control that load, right? And then to be able to increase it over time, right? I want that. That's like the simplest explanation I can create of strength training. Does that feel clear? Right? This is what we're actually doing. It's not this like vague, oh, I want to get stronger. It's like, can I move something heavy or something that is resisting me, right? Can I move it smoothly throughout a healthy range of motion, right? So in addition to the sort of physiological aspects of training, right? So if we're thinking about the musculature, we're really looking at muscle tone, muscle capacity, and muscle volume. So how big your muscles actually are, right? How well those muscles are able to sort of function under load, right? As well as their capacity, meaning like what was our mind muscle connection, right? How well am I able to really feel the body, right? Which brings us into the other aspect of strength training, which has to do with neurological capacity and function. So I was saying this on my Instagram stories the other day, our ability to have cross-lateral motion, have smooth action, right, is directly associated with cognitive function. We see people who are, women who are able to age gracefully, right? It's very rare that we'll see someone in the gym at 60, 70, 80, right? That if they have maintained their ability to have smooth and fluid and strong movement, that they have significant cognitive decline, right? So if we look about this increase in cognitive decline over the course of human history, right, we're also seeing that come along with the decrease of overall requirements of our physical body for the actions of survival, right? So being able to move is healthy for our brains, not just our bodies, right? There is only one system. So when we're strength training, we're equally training our neurological capacity as well as our sort of structural physiological capacity in terms of our musculature. We're also training responsiveness into our connective tissue, and we're also adding, density to our bony structure, where there's all these physiological benefits, which we can talk about in a minute. But when we are training effectively, we're really getting all of these benefits to work together, right? Now, I know we talked about there's this idea that maybe we shouldn't have to strength train, but because like people in the past did not. But yeah, of course not, right? Not only did they have active exercise-based lifestyles, they also specifically had strength requirements for their day. They'd be pulling water up from a well several times a day, right? They would be pulling wagons full or pushing wheelbarrows, right? You would be hinging rather than squatting for hours, right? Doing actions of daily living. And you'd also be walking mostly everywhere that you go, right? So we would be having these aspects of not just exercise, but specifically training, right? Where things are hard and heavy regularly every day, right? And when we don't actually have that in our modern culture, right? We're not having those actions happen, and therefore they need to be built and put specifically back into our lives. Okay, any questions on this so far? This is all, more overview of like training versus exercise and why we actually need this. Okay, so I want to move right along and talk to you about what actually do we need to train, right? And this, I think, is, I really want you to take kind of note of this particular section, because if you are interested in having that sense of freedom in your body, being able to like run or jump or leap or bound, right? Being able to climb, being able to pick up something heavy and not have it stress you out, being able to push something, pull something, walk for as long as you want to, run for as long as you're interested, right? if we want to be able to, feel mobile, have better sex, pick up your kids, wear your baby, like whatever it is that you want to do, that requires very specific physiological capacity in the body. And that is unique to women's bodies. And it is as follows. Okay. The first thing that I'm interested in us training is our breath capacity. I know this sounds kind of budding because you're like, wait, we're talking about training and you're talking about breathing, but correct. We are talking about breathing because what I'm interested in is our respiratory diaphragm being able to ascend and descend, and our pelvic diaphragm being able to ascend and descend, and these to be able to move together. So the ascension of the respiratory and pelvic diaphragm in tandem, and the descending of the respiratory and pelvic diaphragm together, right? And they will descend on the inhale and ascend on the exhale. This action. Now, this might seem very simple. However, being able to maintain that movement of respiratory diaphragm and pelvic diaphragm under load in a variety of different actions, positions, and during athletic endeavors, like that more than anything else is going to support our pelvic health and our longevity. It's also going to support our ability to create power and gain strength. So really understanding what's happening with our breath mechanics and understanding how to positively influence our breath mechanics, right? And understanding how to maintain those breath mechanics when we're doing variety of, training activities, different exercises, different movements, right? This is foundational, right? When people breathe well, they get stronger. Not only do you have better nervous system regulation, it also is incredibly important for being able to stabilize your pelvic musculature. Now, a lot of people are interested in kind of cueing the breath. This is great, right? Cueing breath in terms of movement and being able to not just say, oh, this is how you do it. You breathe in here, you breathe out here, but actually how is your diaphragm moving within your body? You being able to understand that, you being able to identify what is expanding and what's not, and you being able to influence that movement through very specific positional breathing exercises is the foundation for healthy training. The foundation for healthy training. If your strength training practice does not include specific breathing exercises, right? At least at the beginning, if you're new to this, or even if you're coming back and have never done this, right? Then you're likely not utilizing this incredibly important aspect of your physiology to support your movement of daily life. Capiche? Train the breathing, honeys. This is the first one. And how do we train the breathing? Right? Down and up, down on the inhale, up on the exhale, and looking at where that is happening and where it's not, and why that's happening and why it's not. And so we can then adjust and have specific exercise selection based on improving that capacity. Okay. The second one that I want everyone, the second one that I want everyone to train is your pelvic positioners. So if you follow me or you're familiar with my work, I'm like, stop clenching your glutes. Don't just tuck your tailbone. Don't squeeze your anal mouth endlessly, right? Stop endlessly Kegeling. This restriction and constriction at the bottom of the pelvis is usually quite dysfunctional when done in a chronic fashion. There's nothing wrong with doing those actions intermittently. No human action is inherently wrong. However, if we're trying to control our pelvic position, right, or just control our pelvis or stabilize from that musculature of within the pelvic bowl and the pelvic floor, right, that's often going to be ineffective in our long-term health and strength goals. So what do we need to work on? We need to understand how your hamstrings, specifically your proximal hamstrings, so the hamstrings that attach to the pelvis, I'll show you on the model, are able to control the position of the pelvis. Another way to say this, right? All of this musculature, this is the female pelvis, right? All of this musculature that's down here between your sit bones, your coccyx, and your tailbone, right? And your pubic bone, all of this internal pelvic musculature. If, right, we are tucking our tailbone or clenching our sit bones together, squeezing your glutes all the time, right? We are minimizing mobility in this area and we're minimizing movement in this area, right? Then when all of this is congested and we're moving the pelvis from that musculature, what we are not doing is allowing that breath to move effectively. We're not allowing that pelvic diaphragm to lift and lower because we're moving from clenching our glutes, and which is going to be minimizing that mobility within the pelvic diaphragm. So instead, we're interested in creating spaciousness down here. And one of the primary ways that we're going to do that is teaching our body a different way to move the pelvis. And what I would suggest, right, this important action is, how do you move your pelvis from your hamstrings? Your hamstrings are attached to these sit bones, these ischial tuberosities, and the proximal, meaning the part of the hamstring that's closest to its origin, and the origin would be here on the bottom of the sit bones, right? So how do we actually get these hamstrings to turn on? And you can imagine, if those hamstrings are going to shorten, right, that'll tip the whole pelvis this way. And if those hamstrings are going to lengthen, it'll tip the whole pelvis this way. And that by being able to shorten and lengthen the hamstrings under load, we're able to control the position of the pelvis. Does that feel clear? Right? I want you to all give me flashers, because this is an important point, right? So being able to control the pelvis from the hamstrings is a crucial skill for women specifically, because otherwise we're trying to control our pelvis, which, guess what? Controlling your pelvic movement is how you're going to feel mobile in your hips. It's how you're going to feel stable. It's how you're going to feel like you can jump and leap and bound or squat or hinge or whatever, right? And if we're not clear about how to move that pelvis, not from clenching, right, but instead from intelligent movement of where is actually attached to the bones, honey, right, then we're likely going to create tension over time. That ain't it. I don't care what your athletic goals are, right? You clench so bad, right? And me telling you, I'm just reading this thing in the chat, right? Yeah, okay, guess what? If you clench so bad and then people are telling you like, oh, don't clench your asshole, you're like, okay, cool. That doesn't freaking help me, right? What do I do instead? And this is what I'm telling you to do instead. Can you understand how, right, to maybe release, because you're going to work on positional breathing that's going to give you space in your pelvic floor? And then can you understand how to turn on your hamstrings? Because this ain't ever going to let go, honey, if something else doesn't pick up the mantle, right? And what needs to pick up the mantle is the hammies, right? So if you're not actually able to train your hamstrings effectively, you're likely not going to be able to stop clenching your booty, right? And if we're clenching our butt all the time, it's going to minimize strength in our glutes. And remember, the glutes are the queens of the body, right? They guide all of our movement. So hamstring length and suppleness is really important. No, that's not what I would say. I would say hamstring strength and capacity is really important. The idea that you're supposed to stretch your hamstrings and make them more supple has often taught them to not extend and contract and not lift weight. They're often just long and loose and not really moving a whole lot. So no, I would say, well, yeah, I mean, like, no, that would not be my priority. My priority would be instead, can you figure out how to load your hamstrings? Can you figure out how to both eccentrically and concentrically load them, meaning they're under load as they lengthen and they're under load as they shorten, right? And the idea that suppleness and length is going to help you is one of the primary things that actually minimizes your hamstring's ability to control the position of your pelvis. Does that difference feel clear? If your hamstrings are long and weak and flaccid, they're not moving shit around, right? We actually need them to be incredibly dynamic, right? And for many of us, because we were told long, beautiful, supple hamstrings and deep forward bend is important, well, I would say it's actually secondary to the ability of those hamstrings to carry load, right? They need to carry load. Okay, so I'm telling you what to train, right? The first one, mobility in the breath. The second one, control pelvic position through the hamstrings. The third one, rotation, right? And what are we rotating? The thorax, the rib basket. Remember, your heart's in a basket, not a cage, right? That rib basket needs to be able to expand and contract and needs to be able to rotate. So when I'm talking about rotation, I'm talking about these type of actions, right? The ability to actually have your ribs rotate as well as shift side to side without side bending, right? So right now I'm bending to my right, and now I'm shifting my ribs to my right. My shoulders are relatively even. Shifting my ribs to the left, my shoulders are relatively even, rather than just kind of side bending or tipping. I'm also able to rotate around the midline. Training rotation is going to create more space for your respiratory diaphragm. Let's go back to step one. Respiratory diaphragm needs to be able to move so pelvic diaphragm can move. Our pelvic diaphragm needs to be able to move for all pelvic functions: continence, eliminating the bowels, sex, orgasm, childbirth, minimizing prolapse, menstruation, all elimination patterns, minimizing pain. Like, we need mobility in the pelvis for it to be able to function. For the pelvic mobility, we need to have respiratory diaphragmatic mobility. And if you're locked up in your ribs and thorax, right, then you're going to minimize the mobility of that respiratory diaphragm. And again, minimal mobility in the respiratory diaphragm, minimal mobility in the pelvic diaphragm. We see that being associated with virtually all women's health concerns. So training rotation and rotation under load, right? Not only are you able to increase that range of motion, but not just by like reaching for end range, but then from that end range, right? Are you then able to gain strength and power, gain strength and power? And this comes from strengthening the back, right? Comes from strengthening, essentially all these muscles that are involved with rotation, right? So often in strength training, we're being like press up and down, right? Forward, right? Go forward and back, right? Curl, in and out. And what is very, very important for women to be able to build the sense of athleticism, the sense of freedom, the sense of responsiveness in the body that we talked about being so enticing, right? We need to train rotation, and we need to train rotation under load. Does that feel clear? Okay. Breath, pelvic position, rotation, right? Foot mobility. Your feet need to be able to move. If they're stuck in socks and shoes that are restrictive and in foot prisons for their entire life, then they can't actually do this. Think about your feet as these magical jellyfishes that are supposed to be able to lift and smush, right? And they're also supposed to be able to do that under load, right? You're getting the gist, right? They're supposed to be able to do that and lift and lower the weight of your entire body. Think about that. Those foot muscles are very small, right? And we actually need them. I weigh about 145 pounds, right? I need the muscles of my feet. And even specifically, if I want to do something on one leg, like jumping or running or bounding, I need to have the muscles of my feet be strong enough to be able to lift and lower underneath the load of my entire freaking body, right? That's a lot to ask, specifically if our feet are just going like this or going like this, are just sort of are minimized in their mobility and in their strength. So understanding how to get the feet moving, unlocking the feet is something that is incredibly important for building athleticism, right? And it's something that we need to train. When we see a lack of foot mobility, we often see a lack of hamstring and glute engagement, right? We won't get into that entirely in this call as to the physiology of how they're related, but take my word for it, right? Where I'm just telling you, if our feet can't move particularly well, right, then we're not likely seeing great movement and great sort of eccentric and concentric contraction in our glutes and hamstrings. Likewise, if our feet don't move particularly well, we see that being correlated directly with a lack of mobility in our pelvic bowl, right? So we know the pelvic bowl needs to move, right? You're here with me. This is my soapbox, right? So the ability for those feet to lift and lower, right? That is something that we need to train regularly and not just have I was told I've done a lot of movement training over the years, but I think back to my original yoga training and I was told, lift my arches, lift and flare my toes. And I did that for almost a decade, right? Just creating these high arches, broad toes, stiff feet, but I never really taught my feet to move. I never really taught them how to become stiff and absorb load versus how to become supple and absorb yield. And that is an action that needs to be trained if we're interested in being able to have this sense of freedom in the body. Breathing, pelvic positioning with the hamstrings, rotation, foot mobility. Are you still with me? I've got 3 more. I know it's kind of a lot. Okay. Hinging. What is hinging? Hinging is not bending over at the waist, despite what many of us might have been told. It's also not that ability to have a flat back, right? Hinging is an action that happens in the pelvis, right? Hinging is the ability of our pelvis to be able to move from a posterior tilt to an anterior tilt, right? And actually create space here in this posterior pelvic floor. We're also interested in the ability of the pelvis to create this action, right? Have these ilium bones be able to internally rotate, right? So when we're looking at hinging actions, we're looking at creating pelvic strength and mobility, right? A lot of us, if we aren't actually strong and mobile in our pelvis, we will hinge, flat back yoga hinge. That ain't a hinge, honey, right? And just the fact that it's called flat back, it lets you know what's working. It's your back, right? And where do we see that action? We see women with that movement happening in their lumbar spine and in their hamstrings, right? So their hamstrings are quite lengthened, and therefore that pelvis might be able to tip forward because those hamstrings are really long, right? But guess what's not happening? We're not having any movement in the actual bones of the pelvis. I'm not having any actual nutation of the sacrum. I'm not having any actual spaciousness happen in between the sit bones, right? The pelvis is just being tipped up and down by largely the lumbar spine, right? And by the length in the hamstrings, as opposed to those hamstrings controlling the position of the pelvis, right? And then the actual bones of the pelvis being able to move themselves, creating a true action of internal rotation of the iliums and hinging. Now, I know that might seem like a little bit in the nitty gritty, but hinging is going to lengthen and strengthen our glutes. So often when we have long hamstrings, we have shortened glutes and compression here in this posterior pelvic floor. That is also associated often with length in our low back. And when muscles can't contract, I should say, concentrically contract, when they can't like shorten in order to stabilize us, right? Then they often feel long and weak and unstable. And when the glutes can't lengthen to stabilize us, then we often feel like we're clenching in the pelvic floor, and we feel chronically stiff in our hips. Sound familiar? Long, weak, and unstable, and also kind of stiff. It's like vaguely confusing, right? But it doesn't have to be. We actually need to work with that concentric contraction of the hamstrings. How do we get those hamstrings turned on, as well as this hinging action in the pelvis, right? This is going to entirely transform your movement capacity, right? It also will allow your glutes to get stronger. And remember, your glutes are queens, right? Glute strength and grip strength and foot mobility. Whew, when I see that in women who age, we just see better health outcomes overall. Like those are the metrics that we're looking at of women being able to like age gracefully. I will spare you the research on osteopenia and, all of the kind of bone degenerative stuff and like, falling risk and all of that. But the things that we see correlated most specifically are glute strength and grip strength, right? So let's just keep that in mind, right? So hinging, capiche? We clear? Okay, 2 more. You're doing great. Pulling. We live in a pushing focused world. How many of us were taught to do down dog, push the floor away, to do push-ups, right? How many of us feel like we were taught that pushing, right, is like what's up? Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with pushing, but in our world, we generally have a lack of pulling action, right? And specifically for women, we need to train pulling, right? Pushing, everyone just do that. Just take your arms and just like push them forward and feel what happens to your front body, right? We often have some like kind of like contraction, maybe in the abdomen. We might have some flexion in the spine. Y'all with me? You're like, oh, I feel the front of my body, right? Now, have your hands out like this, turn your palms towards each other. I want you to stay stable in your chest, and I want you to pull back, right? Like you're doing a rowing action. You are likely now feeling that from the back of your body, right? If we're interested in remaining upright, if we're interested in having our skull stacked over our ribs, stacked over our hips, stacked over our feet, right? Having that uprighted posture, we need our back body, our posterior chain, right, to turn on. Right? We're often told like, oh, like do more core work or something to fix your posture. Don't even let me, there's a lot I could say to that comment, but like what I'm instead offering us is what if we had this ability to have our back body hold us upright? And that often comes from pulling actions and likewise from hanging actions, right? Think of pull up as well, right? It's a pulling action. Pulling actions are inherently supportive for our back body on our posterior chain. And what we see is women who have stronger backs and stronger posterior chains have less pain, more sort of stable and upright posture, right? And are generally more capable, right? And I think so much of my early movement training was really pushing focused, right? Could I push in all of these various yoga poses? Could I walk on my hands? That kind of thing, right? And we have a lack of pulling in our daily lives. Often we're not like doing these pulling actions, right? And I think that being able to train them therefore is a really important aspect here. So this about back body strength and pulling versus pushing is very helpful. To be clear, you can still push and build back body strength, right? So I don't know. So I was doing overhead presses this morning, right? And I'm like, I know how to activate my lats and my, traps, and I can like push up from that, right? To move a weight overhead, right? But being able to, like, for me to learn how to use my back to push, I had to pull, if that makes sense. Like for most women, creating the mind-body connection of our entire posterior chain more easily comes from pushing rather than pulling. And then when we learn to push from our back body, boom, that's when you start to do unassisted. That's when you start to do push-ups. That's when you start to do more, just have more dynamic upper body strength, right? So pushing and pulling, they're both important, but I think specifically for women, we need to focus more on pulling for many of us. And also, they go together because you can pull and work your thoracic rotation, right? And you can also breathe while you pull. Oh my God, now we're getting freeing three birds with one stone. Breath work, rotation, pulling. It's so cool. What if your pelvis is stable while you're doing it? What if you're not wiggling your hips all around because you're able to stabilize your pelvis with your hamstrings? Oh my goodness. Now we're starting to build integration that's able to allow us to do cool dynamic shit and feel good in respect to our female physiology. All right. Are you ready for the last one? You've just sat through this list of 7. Okay. This last one that I want to add is dynamic athletic action, right? Adding power. If we want to be able to jump rope, we need to train how to jump. If you want to be able to jump up and catch something, jump up and grab a bar, right? I don't know. I'm not saying you can dunk a basketball, but you get the vibe, right? To have this ability to have upward lift. If you want to be able to take off and sprint, if you want to be able to have a sense of explosive power, right? Which I will add is one of the primary things allows us to feel like dynamic and athletic. That feeling of freedom in our bodies that maybe some of us have had, maybe some of us have always desired. And it's likely, you probably wouldn't be here if it still felt like as robust as it once was. One of the things that allows us to have that is this ability to create explosive power up from the ground, right? Or forward, right? Or backwards even. Can you jump back? Can you jump forward? Can you jump up? Can you land down, right? Can you move dynamically and athletically? Now, therefore, if we want to regain that ability and build that capacity, we need to train it, right? It's not just going to be hinging and deadlifts and rotations with bands and curls and presses. We also need to train cross-lateral movement, dynamic movement, and movement that's moving a little quicker, meaning like maybe you're slow to the ground on like a 5 count, and then you power up, right? Changes in pace, this type of training. Now, I will add, not only is it fun, right? I think personally, right? But it also works with this neurological aspect that's so important for trusting the body, right? I put here, where was it? Okay. That ability to feel like we can like trust ourselves is as much comes from like our neurological capacity as it does come from our physical structure. So like I had a really significant, whatever. I've had a lot of significant injuries, but most recently I've struggled with knee pain in my right knee. And it was really bad at one point in time. I couldn't walk downstairs and I was like, what is this? I'm a personal trainer. I can't even move. Right. And what I found, to be clear, it feels really great now. So just want you to know you can regain ability and I'm here to help you. But what I found is my entire movement patterns changed because I was like guarding my knee. Right. So I just had a sense of tension and I wouldn't move freely. Right. And then I'm adding this tension to try to guard and protect the knee because I have this pain. Right. And now I have tension in my overall movement. Right. When you're tense in your movement, you're less fluid. You don't move as effectively. And then you're more likely to injure yourself. Right. And then you're more likely to not actually have that feeling of freedom in the body. Right. And then you're actually adding more tension because you're gripping. Right. And then when you're gripping even more, then you're likely adding more pain. And then this becomes part of how women move. I had this injury and I never moved the same ever again, right? As opposed to really working specifically in a way that can teach the body how to yield, how to soften, how to absorb load, how to create movement at pace, and giving ourselves those experiences in training so that when I trip, and I all of a sudden have to blah, 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 and do something at pace, I'm not going to have this only experience be, I grip, and then I'm more likely to actually be in pain and hurt myself, right? And this is therefore something I really want us to work on in our training is dynamic movement, athletic movement, plyometric movement where we're getting up and down, moving at pace, up and off the ground, off hands, feet, that kind of thing. Meaning jumping off the ground, landing. And especially if that feels like an ability that you had at one point in time And now either because of your pelvic pain or because of any experience that you have at this stage of your womanhood, you're like, yeah, I don't really feel like I could like jump a hurdle. I don't really feel like I could jump up onto a box. I don't really feel like I could jump rope. I don't really feel like I could, move quickly in a way where I wouldn't be like afraid. Then that is something we can train. And I just want you to know that I was there and I'm no longer there. And it's because I really specifically worked on this stuff in my training. Okay. Does that feel clear? So we just went through exercise versus training, what you want to train, how training is unique, how, like why training is important and like what feelings we can create ultimately and how it's not this massive mystery, right? There's actual stuff that's female body specific, right? And that list to me is largely breathing, pelvic positioning via the hamstrings, rotation in the thorax, foot mobility, hinging, pulling, and dynamic movement, right? That's the list. So if you're wondering on like, what do I do? How do I like stop exercising, stop just like going to a random movement class or stop just like doing some whatever video or like not knowing what to do with the gym or whatever. If you actually want to regain this sense of strength and freedom and capacity in your body, that's what you focus on, right? And if you are short on time, you've got 30 minutes, right? I want you to pick exercises that check those boxes, right? Maybe you do 7 exercises, right? Because there's 7 categories. Or maybe you are like, I gave an example. I'm like, oh, this is a great rotation and pulling exercise, right? You could also do one that's like foot mobility and hinging together, right? You can do one that's like pelvic positioning and, working on your pelvic position and your hamstrings with a pull, right? Excuse me. We can start to link these together with intelligent exercise selection. And when women do this and they do this consistently, this is how I see our bodies start to transform. This is how I see our athletic ability start to be regained and built. And this is also where I see the most positive outcomes between a movement practice and other health outcomes. And I want to talk about that for a minute, right? So this is where we're seeing improved thyroid function. This is where we're seeing improved bone density. This is where we're seeing improved hormonal function. This is where we're seeing improved metabolic function. This is where we're seeing increased bone density. This is where we're seeing decreases in pain. This is where we're seeing sort of like improvements in overall pelvic health and function in terms of like sexual capacity, orgasmic capacity, elimination patterns, right? This is where we're seeing decreased risk of all cause mortality with aging, right? This is where we're seeing decreased risk of heart disease, diabetes. Like it is within this metric of gaining, regaining, and progressing these actions and how they relate to strength overall that we see all of those benefits come back into the body and how we're seeing massive improvements from an overall healthcare perspective and specifically a women's healthcare perspective based on training. This is not the same if we're just focusing on how do I like do a HIIT workout and like go for a walk. Like we don't actually see those same benefits. And none of us have endless time, right? We're all here to like, how do I do this more efficiently? Like, how do I actually get more bang for my buck? Is what you do. And whether you do this with me or not, I just like want you to work with someone or learn or just like take these principles yourself and like think about how whatever movement your practice you're doing, that these are primary components. Capiche, muffins? Do we feel clear on this list? Okay. So much sense. Love that it makes sense. Okay. I have a couple other things, and then we're going to do a Q&A. So one of the biggest, I get it. I'm so glad you get it. Okay. One of the biggest lies that I have learned, and I want to now dissuade you from, is if you are in pain in an area or a structure or, a part of your body, that you need to stop moving that part of your body and rest it. No. I'll just say that there. No. I mean, is there a moment for rest? Of course. And that moment for rest is rupture, right? There's 4 causes of structural pain. I'll be very brief here. Compression, adhesion, rupture, and inflammation, right? Rupture, right? We can think of that like a broken bone or a torn ligament, right? And where, you do actually need to have stability on either side of that ruptured structure and keep it relatively still. But what is going to support either side of that rupture? Well, we need movement on either side of it so that it can be supportive and hold it in place. So even in that circumstance, movement is always healing. Movement is the language of the body. Movement is the first thing that we develop from an embryological perspective. Babies move before they do anything else, right? Movement is the initial language of the body, and movement quality, right? We just talked about improving quality of movement. So like better hinge mechanics, better foot mechanics, better breath mechanics, better rotation, like improved movement quality is what I want us to focus on, not just quantity. Because quantity of movement, I don't know, maybe some of you are watching this recording or watching this call who've had a lot of quantity of movement. I'll be right there. I used to teach 15 plus movement classes a week and like run and like be like an exercise, being one of those fitness girlies. I'm not totally like that anymore, right? And I had a very high quantity of movement and my body felt like shit, right? I had like low body fat. I like my appetite was screwed up. I didn't have great, I had thyroid issues. I was in a fair amount of structural pain. Like it wasn't quantity. It was then when I started to focus on this quality of movement that my metrics overall started to improve, right? Now, so what if you're here and you're like, my XYZ hurts, right? Obviously, this is not medical advice, but the idea that like, oh, your feet hurt, we likely need to figure out how to get them moving again. Oh, your hips hurt or your hips feel stiff, we likely need to figure out how to help them move healthfully and functionally. Oh, you're in chronic back pain, right? It's likely because your back is moving a lot and your feet, knees, hips, your glutes, and your pelvic floor are not moving a lot, right? They're actually maybe stuck in their movement, right? So, what I'm interested in is if you specifically are in pain, all the more reason for the most part. And I will say this definitely for my clients, I've coached thousands of women over the years, right? And then in my own body, I've had very severe structural pain. I like broke my neck, my back, my hip, my pelvis, my shoulder, right? I broke my ankle. I broke both my wrists. I got in a really bad accident. I've broken my 50 bones in my body, right? And I have rehabbed these injuries, right? And I rehabbed them largely through intelligent movement based on these principles, based on movement quality, right? And that's what I want for you. Okay. Last thing, it doesn't have to be that crazy, right? I used to be a workout junkie. I'm now just a busy person, probably like you, right? And so what do I actually do? I mean, I strength train on average twice a week. 2 to 4 times, kind of depends on my week. But this last year, it's been a lot for me. Like I've just my life has been, stressful. And I've trained on average twice a week and I've made massive gains doing that. Depending on the time that I have, I train from 30 to 60 minutes. It's not really that much, right? But I know what I'm going to do and I'm going to hit those boxes, right? I'm so glad that that's life-changing to hear because right, it doesn't actually have to be crazy. This doesn't have to be your whole life. If you train intelligently for 45 minutes twice a week, your body would change. It really would, right? The way your body would feel would change, right? And of course, you can do more than that, right? But if you just do that, that will still have massive, massive impacts. I also, because, right? So that's one thing. Yeah, training, structured. You got to do it. Take the time, make the time. It is what it is, right? Other thing, or the next thing is incorporating these actions into daily living. Once you understand, oh, this is how my feet move. Oh, this is how my pelvis moves. Oh, this is how I'm breathing. Oh, this is how I'm rotating. Then maybe when you can walk on uneven ground in more flexible shoes and you can get your feet moving better in your actions of daily living, right? Oh, once you learn how to hinge instead of kind of move from your back or squat and stress out your joints, then maybe you can start hinging regularly to pick up your kids or pick up things off the ground or when you're doing dishes at the sink, right? You can start to incorporate these actions, right? Maybe now that you're like, oh, wow, pulling makes my back feel better. Maybe you start pulling a wagon instead of pushing a stroller, right? Just do a little swapperoo, right? Maybe once you're like, oh, I now get how to engage my glutes without clenching my asshole. Maybe now you can start getting up and down from the ground without using your hands. And if you're a mom or just a person, right, maybe you do that a bunch of times a day, right? Once you start to understand how to move, how your respiratory and pelvic diaphragm move in your breathing, because you've now felt this and have some somatic experience in that, that is now available to you in your actions of daily living, right? So this is how we then take our exercise and make it functional, right? This is how we take the principles of our training and then move them into our lives, right? And now all of a sudden your exercise, the movement through your life, going back to the beginning of this call, is really, really supportive, right? And then your training is progressively overloading and strengthening those actions, right? And like, I'm not here for perfect, I'm here for progress, right? I'm here for just like improvement overall, right? So yeah, you do that for 30 to 60 minutes a week when you train, and then you're starting to incorporate these actions in your daily living, your body will feel different, right? It really will. It'll feel different in a month. And just imagine you do that for 6 months, you do it for a year. This is how you're going to gain and regain ability, right? And yeah, and then, okay, first of all, so that was kind of the last thing I want to say. And then I want to see if there's any questions. I know Janelle had a question in the chat, and I just want to shift to that. But if there's anyone else who has any comments or questions before we move forward. Okay. All right. So the last thing that I really want to say is that there's a big mental piece to this, right? So being able to really learn a new skill, right? Like strength training or learning to move your body in a new way requires discipline, right? And it requires discipline rather than, I mean, motivation is helpful. I'm not saying that it doesn't require motivation, right? And maybe, all these factors are motivating, all of the health benefits or, your pain that you're currently in, maybe all those are motivating. However, motivation can wane, but discipline is what doesn't, right? So do I feel motivated to move in this season of my life? Like, not particularly. Like, I'm kind of just like, whatever, right? But guess what? I'm generally disciplined, right? And I have put structures in place that allow me to keep those commitments to myself, right? And that is going to be a big piece of this. I think for many women is understanding if they do want to stop exercising and start training, if they do want to incorporate these actions into your life, if you do really want to create this as a focus and a goal, right? Then what is going to be the structure and the framework that you need that's going to provide you the support to stay consistent? Because all of the other virtues fall apart without consistency, right? Because that's truly the only thing that's going to change your body. Okay, so with that in mind, right, what I want to tell you about now is my strength training for the female body program, right? And this is a membership that I am launching. It launches on Friday, right? And so I've been a movement teacher for over a decade, and I've taught a strength training course, and maybe some of you even have this strength training course, right, for for years now. And I've listened to a lot of you and like what it is that you actually want. And a lot of what it is that you're like, I want live training, I want live coaching, and I want progressive, and I want accountability. So I've just created my membership based on these principles. So here's what's in it. It's called Strength Training for Female Body. I know, it's a brilliant title. Okay. There are circuits, right? And they're 6 weeks in length, meaning you're going to do the same workouts Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Or if you just want to do Monday, Wednesday, that's fine, right? There's 6-week circuits. So you're going to work with and gain acuity, skill, and progression within the same workouts. The mind wants variation. The body wants consistency, right? It's just what it is, right? So learning to do things and practicing them every week is really important. I see this question and I will get to it, Madison. So stick around, right? So how does this look, right? They are progressive, meaning every 6 weeks, you will have new programming that's based on you getting stronger from the last 6 weeks of programming, right? What's really cool about this is I've made all this, right? I've made all these programs. I've made all these workouts. I've designed every single one. Every single exercise has its own video, right? So you can learn all these exercises and then how to progress them throughout your 6 weeks. And then the first week of the circuit, I'm going to be there live and coaching you. So you want to learn these exercises? Cool. Come train live with me Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? And then every other week at that same time, they're going to be at, we're going to have accountability time. That's going to be at 11. It's going to be at this time, right? Every Monday and Wednesday, you're going to be able to come and watch that recording and train with other women, right? And I can come and drop in and cue you. right? So there's acuity, there's accuracy, there's accountability, right? And it's going to have this really interesting and I think super effective, again, I've done a lot of training, combination of live coaching and then personal like progression. Does that feel clear? So every 6 weeks, there's new circuits, but the first week I'm there live training with you. And then every week after that, there's a live set time, accountability. You're with the recording and you're there to continue to practice these exercises with this group of women. In addition, right, so there's accountability every week. In addition, there's also live Q&As, right, every other week. So then I'll teach you live the first week. You have questions, come, let me look at your form. Come to the Q&A, come to my Opus office hours. I want to look at you and I want to cue you and I want to teach you and I want to help you figure it out, right? And and that's like, will be the structure. So a couple questions here. Is this a progression from True Core Health or something different? Right. So I have a True Core Health program that's about healing pelvic pain, healing pelvic concerns, and starting to move better. Right. I think absolutely that stuff is important. And I do that stuff forever. However, if you want to lift weights, get stronger, and build more athleticism, you're going to need to strength train. Right. Does that mean that we start neglecting our pelvic health and that we don't do things that are going to like specifically breathing exercises and mobility stuff that's really going to help us if you're struggling with a pelvic health concern? No. Realistically, I do all the stuff from True Core Health and I strength train, right? But one of them is going to teach you how to heal your pull-ups. The other one's going to teach you how to do a push-up. The other one's going to teach you how to do a pull-up. Like those aren't actually the same goal. Does that make sense? Right? Now, do you know what I want to do? I want to heal my pull-ups and do a pull-up, right? Okay. So if that's you, right, you can be in both memberships. There's a discount. You can do both, but you can figure that like, and you can totally progress. And that is the way that I designed it, is if you feel really good and you feel stable and in my True Core Health program and you're already doing that. And now you want to add lifting weights. You want to add athletic progression. You want to add from doing stuff on the ground where you're focusing on breathing to like lifting weights and jumping and doing more dynamic things. Boom. That's what this is here for. Right. And I get that might seem like confusing, but I really want you to think about True Core Health is there to remind you that you have a body, that it's freaking amazing, that it can heal, and that it can move in cool ways. Strength training, this program, this membership is here to help you remember that you're an athlete and that you can progress and change and regain ability. Does that difference make sense, Melissa? Hopefully you're still here. Okay. This other question. I don't have a back injury, but I don't have an injury, but I do have chronic lower back pain and issues with silent glute and calves that overcompensate. Which of your trainings would you recommend for someone like me? This one. Madison, this is for you, right? If you want to learn how to unlock the feet, unlock the calves, turn on the glutes, heal your back pain, get stronger, this one, right? This is what I would suggest, right? Now, so yeah, that's the simplest. Okay. So in addition, right? So I'm teaching live circuits. There's live accountability every week. You can either train 2 days a week or 3 days a week, depending on your schedule, right? The programming is designed. If you just want to train 2 days a week, do these 2 days. If you want to train 3, add this third day, right? There's additionally going to be live master classes. This is what I'm so freaking psyched about in this membership about all of the questions that you ask all the time. I don't want to just do this on Instagram Live because I want to talk back to you, right? So if you want to learn more about like, okay, how do I like recover? Like, what about my fascial mobility workouts? What if I want to understand more about training with my cycle? What if I really want to lose weight? What about my macronutrients? What about my foot pain? What about the fact that my glutes don't turn on? Can you help me with my hinging? Like all of these are going to be individual live masterclasses that I'm going to teach within this membership that you can come and be like, so who was it? Madison was like, my glutes are silent. That was her word. Okay. If her glutes are silent, she's going to want to be sure to come to my masterclass that's in this membership on, maybe I'll call it, do you have silent glutes? You should come, right? On like hinging and getting your glutes to turn on, right? Because there's all of these topics that really get in our way, right? And guess what? Is training twice a week going to change your life? Yep. But the body that you want and the sense of, and by that I mean not like the aesthetic goals, but like the freedom and the ease is not 6 weeks away, right? It's not a follow along video away. It's consistency and learning and practice, right? And this program is designed, there's progressive workouts for 12 months, right? You can come for the year and keep progressing and getting stronger because it's the body that you're in your goals. Like, I'm not saying they're not right around the corner, but this maturation really, as we grow as women and really understand, like, we're interested in the long game. I'm interested in helping you understand how to move your body for the rest of your life and how to train your body for the rest of your life, not like a 6-week challenge, right? Okay. Live. Okay. So 6-week circuits, they're live, accountability every single week, all of the master classes you can come, a live Q&A. I'll come and Q you every other week, right? Also the ability to book one-on-ones with me. My one-on-one books have been closed and they're going to reopen, but only to women in my memberships, because ultimately I want you to be able to I want to be able to refer you to stuff to do, right? So if you want to work with me one-on-one, postural assessments, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, injury history, recovery, you're going to have the ability to book one-on-ones with me. There's a full year of training, as I said, right? A full freaking year, right? And I mean, it's a monthly membership. You can pay by the month or pay annually, but I just mean there's progressions for you to keep working on this stuff. There's also a class library. So if you want follow-alongs, right? So hang on, let me see what. So this one, I love the subscriptions and still working through the videos. Will this subscription be a repeat in terms of the circuits and progressions? Interested in joining again? So this is cool. Marnie, I believe, was in my last strength training program. No, these are new circuits and new progressions, because what's cool is I'm obsessed with this stuff and I'm becoming a better trainer all the time, right? So I just moved a whole group of women through training progressions for the last 7 months, right? And that was amazing. And now we've made all new workouts, all new progressions. There will be some, movements and exercises that obviously you will be familiar with, but yeah, all new progressions and also access to old recordings. So if you're someone who also just wants to press play and follow along, there's going to be a whole movement library for you, right? As well as truly learning to progress your own workouts. So this is the last thing that I want to say here is specifically for strength training, you need to work with progressive overload, which means you need to actually be changing the amount that you're lifting, right? And so rather than doing the same workout video over and over again, because that you'll get better at it, but you might not actually get stronger. So say you learn workout 1 and you follow along and watch my videos for week 1 and week 2, then maybe you print out the PDF that I've given you, right? And you know the exercises and you're like, oh, last week I did 8 of these. Now this week I'm doing 10, right? And then next week I'm doing 13, right? And you're getting stronger and you're tracking your own progressions, which when we're only just doing what a teacher is saying, when we're only just following along, you're doing the same thing every week. Does that make sense? And you need to be able to actually adjust for your own body, that's something else that's unique from True Core Health. True Core Health, I tell you what to do because obviously that's just really nice and really helpful, specifically for women that are in that stage. To be clear, I have those options here, as well as the option to really learn how to train yourself, right? Really learn how to progress your workouts, which is what I want everyone to learn how to do. Okay. And any questions so far? So training is important. This is stuff you need to focus on. Train with me or somebody else. I don't care. But I want you to train with me and I want you to join my membership so that I can help you. The last thing is you tell me, right? Why I really like doing this now in a membership model is I can respond to you, right? And so we're going to have a full community board. How exciting is this? Right? So we're going to have a community aspect. So do you want to know women that are near you so you can meet up and have a workout buddy? Do you want to have an online accountability partner where we pair you with someone and you work out at the same time every week and you get to know women, right? Do you want encouragement? Do you want weekly recipes? Do you just actual community vibes, which I think can really help us feel accountable and with a group of women and we're progressing together, right? I used to run a gym and studio in person and it was freaking awesome. And why I loved it is I was like, women, what do you need? And women were like, this is the thing that would be really helpful to me. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I can do that. That's what I get to do in this membership, is I get to actually respond to the things that are going to be the most helpful to you because I'm right there with you in a way that I haven't been able to be in my more self-paced courses, right? So that's really freaking cool. Okay, last thing. This course will go live on Friday, right? This course will go live on Friday. Because you're here on this masterclass, you're going to get a discount code. The code is TRAIN, all caps. I'll put it in the thread. And you will get 50% off your first month, right? 50% off your first month. This is the pre-sale. So this course goes live on Friday. We just put the link in the chat. So if you want this, you can use the code TRAIN, get 50% off your first month, and then you'll get full access to this course when it launches on Friday, right? So you're getting a pre-sale offer and a pre-sale price. This code will no longer work after Friday. So if you did want to save this money, then that is available to you because you're here watching this class. And again, we'll send you an email later today that just has this information again, like with the recording and stuff. Yeah. And also if you are currently, this is something that was put in the chat from Carissa, if you're currently in my self-paced strength training course, reach out because you're going to get a grandmothered in rate. So women that have strength trained with me before, if you're watching this recording and you were in my course, I remade this whole thing and switched it into a membership so it can just be better for you, right? And you're going to get a grandmothered in rate. Because if I am not going to, because this course is just better. I'm just a better trainer than when I made that course 3 years ago. And I want you to have better training and I want it to be more responsive. So, I'm obsessed. I'm like into this shit. I want you all to train your bodies. And I don't care whether you want to be like, I don't know, a CrossFit athlete, a gym girly, or just like not have your knees hurt. Like I'm right there with you. Right. And it's going to be really awesome. And it goes live on Friday. The link is in the chat. We'll email it to you as well. You can use the code TRAIN between now and Friday for 50% off your first month. And because it's a membership, you can cancel anytime, right? Come for as long as you want, train with me, do the circuits, do what works for you, right? And use it as you continue to progress in your training. For those of you that are watching this that are in True Core Health as well, right? If you want to see and come in for a month and be like, this is going to help me or not, let me know. And we will have offers for you too. So I'll leave it there because we're almost at time, but I will stick around for a few minutes if anybody has questions on any of this content, what to focus on, why you should train instead of just exercise, what training actually is, any questions about my new strength training membership, ways that I can help you, live coaching, anything like that. I'll open it up to questions. And if nobody has any, then we will go ahead and close, but I'll just give a minute there. Look at this cute baby, Melissa. It's a great question. So equipment needed. Great. This is a minimal equipment program. Isn't that freaking cool? You can do it at home or you can do it at the gym, right? You do need minimal equipment, right? But it's not actually a lot. So I train here, right? So I'm just like in this room, right? I have some bands. You can see them. They're sort of up there and I have some weights. You don't need a ton of weights. I'm generally going to say you need a light set, a medium set, and a heavy set, right? That's it. And if you even just started with a light set and a heavy set, that is going to work for you. Again, in terms of what's light and what's heavy is dependent for you. And in addition, you'll need bands and a ball, right? But you will have a full equipment list and I promise it's minimal, right? Slant boards, a block, some bands, right? Everything that you need could be fit into a laundry basket, right? And so it's not going to like take up a bunch of space in your house, right? And then also you're welcome if you want to do these at the gym. So if women really want to go train at the gym, yeah, there's the equipment list. Carissa just put it in the chat. You can go train at the gym, which I personally like training at the gym, not because I need to, because it's like a good mental space for me to be in, right? And so there are gym versions and home versions for the whole circuit, for all of the circuits. Okay, another question here. Blogs or videos on pelvic positioning with the hamstrings. Honestly, these are the way this course is organized in terms of how it's within the membership is I have a whole movement library and they're broken down based on these essential movements. So like, do you need to, you need to go train rotation more, go to the rotation section and there's, 15 exercises where you're training rotation. Do you know that you really need to work on for your example, pelvic positioning and engagement of the hamstrings? Go to the proximal hamstring section and work on those actions, right? So rather than like blogs about it, right? Those videos are included in my course. In addition, and maybe Carissa, you can pop this one if you're not on my mailing list, I just put out like my favorite hamstring exercise. I put out my newsletter and it's on YouTube. And so you can go to my YouTube channel and there's like, activate your hamstrings, right? And you can do that there. And maybe we can also link it here right now if you are on that risk. And then from there, right, that's just like a way to start. But yeah, specifically to that question, Julie, yeah, that's like what I'm here to teach you. And I generally don't love movement blogs specifically, right? Like I want to teach people live. And yes, that link is now in the chat, right? So that's a hamstring action. But if you do this exercise and you're like, cool, I still don't feel my hamstrings, I'm like, right. That's why I have a live membership, because I might need to actually look at you and cue you. And I hear that all the time. And women are like, how do I know if I'm doing this right? And that's why I've made a framework where I can help you answer that question, right? Because that's not a question I'm going to answer on Instagram. That's not a question that I'm going to be able to answer from this thread. That's a question where I need you to come, set it up, let me look at you, let me cue you, and let me help you, right? And that's why I've structured this membership the way that I have, because that allows you that access and me that ability to support you. Yeah, I need to watch your body, right? And so I have Q&As every other week, right? So like go practice, do the things, listen to my cues, and you might not do it the first time, but if you practice 3 days a week for 2 weeks and then come to the next Q&A, then I can see you, right? And then I can look at you, right? And it's often, if we don't feel something immediately, we just need to actually like keep working with it, right? But I'm still there to help you. If you've never been, this is someone who comes to my Q&As. If you've never been, it's essentially a free personal training session. Yeah, I give everyone 10 minutes and I look at them and I do their individual personal training. And people who have similar questions like, hey, my hamstrings don't fire either. Cool. If I'm cueing the amazing woman to get her hamstrings to fire, lay on the ground, do what I'm doing, see if it helps you, right? And we have 2 hours and I get to as many people as I can. And usually I get to everyone on the call. Okay, any other final questions? All right, women, I hope to see you. I'm obsessed with this. I like truly, like I have been training women for years and I'm like finally now putting out my live training membership. At like so much of what I know about training is in this course, and we get to grow and learn together, and I get to work with you and train you live. So if that's what you've wanted and you wanted that accountability, then like please come join us. You can use this link in the chat. You can get 50% off your first month between now and Friday for the pre-sale. And our live training starts the week of the 20th, right? And then it's on like Donkey Kong, and we're going to be doing live training, live training with me every, for the beginning of every single circuit, and then the live Q&As, and it's just going to keep rolling. And if you stick with us and do the whole year of programming, oh my God, you're going to be yoked, which is like so fun. So, okay, I'll leave it there, women. You're great. We'll talk soon. And you can send us an email or a DM on IG if you have any questions.